Well, the week before last, I was at New Wine Christian Festival. It's a fun Christian camping event with great worship, great teaching, Holy Spirit ministry, and a precious time of fellowship too, especially if you go with others from your church. There was about 6,000 of us on site. There have been 7,000 the week before. Actually, that's a little bit down on previous years, but still a good number. And New Wine this year was held on the East of England showground at Peterborough, although it'll be moving next year. Now, every time my wife and I go to New Wine, as we look around the showground with its thousands of tents pitched up all around you, it makes us think, I wonder if this is what it was like to be part of the people of Israel at different times in their history, when they were all wandering in the desert, living in tents, all together in one place with the presence of God with them too. Now, I admit there would probably have been a lot more sheep and goats around with the people of Israel than there were at New Wine, and probably a lot more space too. But one huge family all together under God, like the Hebrew nation in the book of Exodus. In today's reading from the New Testament book of Hebrews, the writer to the Hebrews is summarizing the history of their nation and the faith and the perseverance of the Hebrews throughout the Old Testament. He uses this as an example to encourage the faith of his readers of his times in the New Testament. He reminds them how their forefathers escaped from Egypt by passing through the Red Sea and then wandered in the desert for many years until God brought them to the promised land, Canaan. There they conquered the cities and defeated the tribes until they had their own land to live in, a rich and fertile land. It was a land prepared and provided for them by God, but even so, they still had to conquer it with his help. After passing through the Red Sea into the Promised Land, the first place to conquer was the city of Jericho. This was a strong and a well-defended city, barred and fortified. To take it by force seemed impossible. Can anybody remember how God instructed the people to take that city? Thank you. March round it, yeah. How many times? 7 times, that's right. And what were they to do while they were marching round? Trumpets, yeah. And they carried something. They carried something important with them. Torches. Hang on, is that one or is that Gideon? No, it was torches, you're right. And the Ark of the Covenant, the very presence of God with them. So they marched around the city and they kept marching around for 6 days. Now I picture some kind of Monty Python-esque sort of situation with the soldiers of Jericho stood on the battlements mocking the people of Israel. You think your trumpets are going to make our city fall down? I won't go into the Monty Python type talk, but I imagine there was a lot of scorn poured on the people of Israel. But sure enough, on the 7th time around, God, whether it was an earthquake or how God did it, we don't know. But we do know the walls fell down, and there's all the geological evidence to support that now too, the archaeological evidence. The walls fell down. The 7th day, God knocked down the city walls, and the city was taken. The conquest of Jericho was the result of an act of faith. It was taken by people who didn't think about what can we do with our weapons and with our armor. They thought about their God and what their God could do. It was an act of faith. The Israelites had faith. It's not what we do, but what our God will do, and it's God's strength that will prevail. And there are so many heroes of the Old Testament who played a part in establishing the people of Israel. Our reading continues and names a few of them: Rahab, Gideon, Barak, Samson and Jephthah, David and Samuel. All these heroes of the Old Testament, and each one played a part in God's plans being worked out in the world. Now, did any of those people have an easy time? No, they did not. None of them did. They all faced great difficulties. In fact, the way that our reading continued might make you wonder if you really want to sign up to be a Christian. Verse 35, there were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. They wandered in the deserts and mountains, living in caves and holes in the ground. Hang on a minute. Is that what we signed up for when we became Christians? But they all had one thing in common. Despite the difficulties that they faced, they kept on going. They knew that they were God's people appointed for the task. And this knowledge gave them the strength to persevere even when times got hard. This was the heritage from the Old Testament that the early New Testament church had inherited. They belonged to this same great and faithful people of God. And it's the same heritage that we've inherited today. We can claim the honor of belonging to that line, that family. As being God's church, we are part of that great body through the ages today. The heroes of the Old Testament persevered in faith that God would see them through the challenges in front of them. And they had a bigger hope too. A hope that God was going to establish his kingdom throughout the world. A kingdom which we would see and know, but which they, even though they didn't see it in their lifetimes, were contributing towards. Verse 39, these were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. As is often the case, things that were true materially in the Old Testament, the establishment of a nation under God in the land of Canaan, is true in a bigger and a spiritual way in the New Testament, that all people in every nation can know God's rule of their lives and can be a part of his great kingdom throughout the world. God achieved this through his son Jesus. The heroes of the Old Testament didn't get to see that in their lifetimes. They only played a part in preparing the ground for Jesus to come. But even so, they played their part in God's purposes for humankind. Now, do you ever feel like God is asking you or your church to do something that seems impossible? Well, maybe that's a good place to be, because it makes us rely not on our own strength and abilities, but on his. We don't need the strength to do things on our own. We just need faith that God can and will work through us if we're obedient to his commands. Now, when I was the vicar at St. John's at Park, that way, I was very involved with the local Church of England primary school, and we amalgamated the school. It amalgamated with the local Catholic school, and it became the new Emmaus Primary School. It was quite a big thing. And I was very involved in the school. And then we got an opportunity to say, well, how could we build on our ministry within the school? And we got an opportunity with a church army worker who was looking for a first post to come up to start running Messy Church in the school building itself. And the school agreed in principle. We thought, oh great, this will be easy. Everything, it can all just happen. But then straight away, we started running into problems. They said, oh yeah, very happy for you to have Messy Church in the school. But the only place we can give you is the school hall. And actually, we need the school hall till 3 o'clock. So you'll just have 15 minutes to set everything up for Messy Church. After we finish the last PE lesson, and ready for you to start Message Church at 3:15. The idea was we'd start Message Church at 3:15, so it was just as easy for parents to come and pick up their kids and come to Message Church as it was to pick up their kids and go home. And you got fed as well. So we thought, 15 minutes, that's not very long. But okay, if that's what you've given us, we'll go with it. Then the school said, actually, and we don't have anywhere that you can store anything. The school is already heaving, all the cupboards are full, you can't keep anything here, so you're going to have to bring everything in by cars or a van or something every week. We thought, every week? 15 minutes to set up the whole of Message Church? Help us, Lord. Anyway, then it continued. So we started Message Church, and actually, it was a big success. Very quickly, the congregation at Message Church grew to be bigger than the congregation in our church. The congregation was about 40, and there was about 40 at Message Church, and it was going really well. But then, more problems and resistance. So we would use the kitchen. So part of Message Church is making a meal for people, if you can do that. So we were cooking a meal for people in the kitchens. So Message Church was on a Wednesday. On a Thursday, I'll get a phone call. Chris, really sorry, Message Church has got to be banned now because you left the hob of the kitchen really untidy yesterday, and the kitchen staff have gone mad. They won't let you use the kitchens anymore, so you won't be able to have Message Church anymore. Now, care to guess what things in the kitchen we did use that week? We used the oven, we used the sink, we hadn't even used the hob, but we got the blame for it. So we had to say, okay, that's fine if that's what we've got to do. So every week then, after Message Church, we not only cleaned everything we used, we cleaned all the rest of the kitchen too. A couple of weeks, Message Church continued to grow. It's up to about 50, 60 people by now. Message Church continued to grow. Then it's, Chris, Message Church is going to have to be cancelled now because some of the children have been sneaking out of Message Church and going writing things on the whiteboards in their classrooms, and so Message Church is going to have to finish now. So I said, no, right, I will then be a policeman. I will walk up and down the corridors all the time Message Church is on to make sure people are not doing that. And it continued. There was more, any little way. Chris, somebody's stolen my water bottle from out of the kitchen fridge. Nobody been near the kitchen fridge? Right, let us buy you a brand new water bottle for you to keep there. It was really, really hard work. And at times we thought, God, if this is from you, why is it hard work? Why are we having to battle like this? But it's like the people in the Old Testament. God opens the way forward, but he doesn't hand it to you on a plate. You've got to keep battling and battling. And Message Church grew and grew. It became 80, 90, 100 people. We were having to turn people away again. And it was all people who never normally came to a church. It was a great thing. God had prepared a way forward and given us the opportunity, but we had to work with him. We had to work with him to make it happen. How many of you, like me, enjoyed watching the Commonwealth Games last week? I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. It's been great. Lots of athletes from all over the world competing. People have set new personal bests. Medals have been won. Records have been broken. And actually, England didn't do too bad for once. It's been good, too, to see many of the athletes praying and thanking God for helping them to give of their best at the end of their events, too, thanking God for his support. Now, have you noticed how so many of the athletes said how the crowds at the events, with all their cheering and their support, helped the athletes to give of their best? That the cheering and the encouragement of the crowds helped them to keep going and to do everything they could give, to do everything they could and give of their very best to keep going and take part in whatever event it was, whether they won or not. In all the interviews I saw, the athletes stressed what an important part the crowds played in encouraging the athletes. Well, our reading today in Hebrews closes by telling us there's a crowd cheering us on too. We're not on our own serving God, despite how it might sometimes feel. There's a crowd of believers, of witnesses, People who followed Jesus since those Old Testament times, who are now in heaven, but who are cheering us on as we try to give of our best to live the Christian life, to run the race of being a Christian, as the Bible puts it. When we try to do something for God, there's a whole crowd of people, Christians who have gone before us, who are cheering for us and want us to succeed. And they're willing us to give of our best in the service of God. We're not on our own. Well, I hope that none of us are ever facing chains or imprisonment, let alone being sawn in half for our faith, or I hope we're not forced to live in a cave. But if you ever find yourself in a place where you're trying to do God's will in faith and find it hard, remember, there's a great crowd of witnesses cheering you on. All those heroes of the Old Testament and the saints of the New Testament are willing you, urging you, shouting to you to encourage and support you. My hope is that that knowledge will make our faith grow, and it will enable us to turn and face ahead with new determination to give of our very best to run the race.